Hello and welcome to Learning for Love, Lessons for Life. I'm Lisa Jaworski and I'm thrilled to have you with us today. We are going to be talking about learning, growing, and seeing things differently. So this is a great subject, I think, that we're going to touch on things that you might not otherwise consider. And today, to help me with this subject, I have Sue Hatch, who will be joining us later on. And then first, to start us off, I have Jeanette Lewis. So Jeanette, I'm really excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Lisa. I've been looking forward to the interview.
Oh, I'm glad. So you and I were connected through a mutual connection. And the reason for that was because of just, I think, how inspirational you are and the fact that you can talk about some of the positive things that you're doing. So I wonder first, if you don't mind, explaining on how you can relate to what this whole show is about. So the sandwich generation and figuring out how to, work, take care of kids, or take care of other things in our lives and how to move forward through that.
Well, let me start, Lisa, with an expression I heard today on a podcast I was listening to, and it was a woman who I admire very much, a psychologist, Mary Pfeiffer, and she recently published a book, Women Rowing North, about growing older. And she talked about living your life with your headlights on. Oh. And I thought that was a wonderful expression. I wanted to bring it into the interview today because so often people seem to kind of move through life and really with very little awareness about what's going on. Right. So the advantage that I have is that I've lived 7.5 decades. And I've had some good experiences, some not so good experiences. But one of the things that I've tried to do is to keep growing, keep learning, and stay grounded and ready to live my life in such a way that it brings a sense of joy and happiness. And I want to say a word about happiness because I blog about happiness, and we can talk about that a little bit more later. But happiness, I think, sometimes gets a little bit overrated. Yeah. And I really believe that happiness is not only what you make of it, but perhaps there's a genetic component to it. Perhaps there's an environmental component to it. And having the awareness, or as Mary Piper said, having your lights on, helps you to really understand, how you are making your life such that you can live it, with reasonable expectations that will bring you some sense of joy and purpose and happiness, right, regardless of what you might experience.
Oh, really good points. And I love that you mentioned the podcast that you listen to, because I think that will help listeners have a place to go after this, to see, more, find out more about that. It reminds me too about a book I've read and actually found quite inspirational too, that's partly led to this show. And her name's Sonja Lyubomirsky. She's a research scientist, psychologist. It looks like you've heard of her. And she's written a few books, but one called The How of Happiness. And it sounds similar, like what you're saying on happiness isn't just this joy all the time. There's a lot that goes into happiness and accepting the different ways that we feel.
Well, what's serendipity? Because I read The How of Happiness a couple of years ago, and then one of her subsequent books. And I was actually going to mention her because I looked at some of the notes that I had taken, and I think she says that 50% of happiness is genetic.
Yep, that's right.
40% is how you live your life, and she gives some areas that you can pursue, and then the 10% is environmental. So if there's only 40% that we have under our control, we better be aware and not be sleepwalking through this lifetime that we have.
Exactly, and the fact that we can reframe that, we can see it as, geez, it's only 40%. Or we can think that's still 40% that we have within our control.
Yes.
So I think there's two different ways to see that, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And so, one of the things that I think about quite a lot is, as someone who is growing older, how do I continue to foster creativity in my life? How do I keep my brain stimulated? How do I keep healthy relationships in my life that bring me, the social stimulation, which is sometimes a little more difficult during this pandemic isolation time. And when I focus on those areas, it keeps me grounded and it keeps me moving forward in some ways that I think I can continue to have purpose, even though I'm not in a career at the moment and not worrying about parenting and not worrying about some of the things that you probably worry about every day. I don't have to run from one thing to the next every minute because I do have the luxury of a little bit more time and more control over my time. But that also means, at least it means to me, that I have a responsibility to try to use that time effectively.
I think you bring up some really good points. And the fact that you're aware of, it sounds like taking care of yourself now and the time that you do have on prioritizing that and making, a conscious effort to use it wisely.
Self-care is important, regardless of, whether we're in our 20s or our 40s or our 60s or later than that, because, that's really all we have. And if we can't take care of ourselves in such a way that we present to the world the kind of person we want others to see, well, then we better start over again. Go back to basics. And we know that life is about starting over. We have losses, we pick up, we carry on, and we learn from those experiences. And I think in some ways, we have to also learn that there's an impermanence to everything we have. Our culture likes us to think that we have a lot of control and that, there is we can go back to those good times. Well, I'm not so sure that you can. You've got to move forward to new good times.
Right. We can't live in regrets and thinking about the past, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about, while we're on the subject on, you mentioned that I'm busy now. And of course, I think we have different stages of busyness and what that looks like in our lives. But what was it like for you before you retired and, when your kids were little and things got overwhelming maybe at times? I'm just assuming here, but how?
Don't worry. I remember those days when there was hardly time to go to the bathroom before you went to bed with, a 60-hour week sometimes and travel on the weekends as well as during the week. A lot of office commitments, career commitments, trying to grow a career. I did an MBA when I was in my early 40s, and I did that on a part-time basis because I thought it would, and I knew it would, give me a ticket into the boardroom. The parenting piece of it was going on at that point. I remember one night coming home from a night class and my son, who was about 6 or 7, standing at the top of the stairs and saying, "Mom, I could stand you being away one night, but 2 or 3 is too much." And, so they get you with guilt in that way. But you just have to kind of sort of take it day by day and realize that this isn't forever, just like nothing else is forever. And keep pushing onward with that sense of purpose and that sense of, you are going to be able to get through this with the determination that kind of got you into it.
Right. And knowing how important, I guess, parts of, aspects of your career can help you find that balance that's necessary. And knowing that, I think people talk so much about work-life balance on, how it needs to just balance out, but it doesn't. We, have days where we're home more and other days where we're working more. And that's the balance, is more through life, as work is a part of life.
Yes, it is. And I think that's a big cultural myth. We need to get rid of this piece about work-life balance, because
I agree.
Life is a balance. It's not work-life.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Jeanette. And I'm hoping you'll stick around for the
Can I just mention my podcast or my blog? I do write a blog as a way of keeping myself stimulated, and it is www.postworksavvy.com. So I just want to promote that. Thanks a lot.
I'm glad you did. And I want you to actually mention that again. Maybe we could talk about that when I bring you back with with Sue at the end of the show, because that's so important. I love that you're doing that.
Thank you.
You don't hear about that every day. Thank you so much, Jeanette.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
I'm going to bring on Sue Hatch to speak with me a little bit. Sue, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Lisa. It's a pleasure to join you.
Thank you. So I reached out to Sue because she has a wealth of knowledge and was a teacher, recently retired, and also is somebody that I've found to be inspirational. And you may recall her mom, I hope that's okay to mention, Sue, who's Patricia Hatch, who's on an earlier episode. So you might notice similar backgrounds for that reason. So Sue, I wondered if maybe we can start by talking a little bit about yours and your mom's relationship and the situation now and what that looks like for you. I think that's a good place for us to kind of initiate this conversation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, speaking about inspirations, my mom is an inspiration to me and the rest of our family. And my dad passed away about 4 years ago, and she subsequently came to live with myself, my husband, and my teenage son.
Wow.
And it's been just a gift to have her with us in so many ways. So, yeah, she's really impacted the way my teenage son looks at older people and seniors and how his friends view aging. And she's taught me so many amazing lessons about growing old in such a positive, vibrant, gracious manner. And it's been a joy to see my husband as well be so supportive and interact with his mother-in-law in such an unbelievable way. So it's been a great situation for all of us. And I think my mom's benefited a little bit too, being surrounded by
Absolutely.
Her family as well.
Yeah. When we've talked before, it sounds like it really is a gift on both sides. You know, it brings the multi-generations together, and it also provides those opportunities for learning, maybe for you as a family and for your son, but also for her to have that support and just regular family life from day to day.
Yes. Yeah. She a day doesn't go by that she doesn't express her gratitude for, something to do with having, a real loving family around her. And I have 5 siblings, and it's great for us all to have a spot to, rally around her and where they feel comfortable visiting her as well, especially during, this pandemic time. She hasn't been alone, and she's been really appreciative to have everybody around her.
Yeah, I bet. Really coming together. We talk about how important community is, and you have your own community within your family, which it sounds, I feel like is very few and far between these days.
Yeah, and I think as a culture too, it's nice for people to hear that, there are some multi-generational families. I know in some parts of the world that's the norm. And here in Canada, I know there are some multi-generational families, and I would, encourage other people to, really embrace it. And it has been so rewarding, I think, for everybody having her here with us.
Well, I love hearing that, and I really wanted to make sure that we got that message through, because you don't hear of it very often, and it sounds like it's such a nurturing setting. So yeah, thank you for talking about that. Now, I also did want to talk about, you've recently retired, and I wanted to ask a little bit about what that's looked like, and what's keeping you busy these days.
Yeah, I recently retired from teaching elementary school for the last 30 years, and it's been a great sort of new chapter in my life. I'm still a teacher. I'm teaching out at the John Hatch Tennis Center, our family tennis club.
Okay,
and,
there's the connection.
So I'm still teaching people, and I feel, grateful to be able to still embrace that role of teacher, because it gives so much back to me too. Helping people learn a sport and seeing their excitement with picking up a new passion like tennis. And I feel like it gives me sort of that gift of, seeing people enjoying themselves, picking up a new passion, and just interacting with wonderful people, doing something new and taking a risk and being successful at it has been, it's a really rewarding new chapter, just like teaching kids is always been something I've really, really enjoyed. So it's been, I've sort of carried on the same line of teaching, and yeah, it's been really, really rewarding.
That's wonderful. I know that between you and Jeanette, I've talked to both of you about how important it is to continue to learn, and how she mentioned something to me that maybe we can touch on when I bring the two of you together. But the fact that it's never too late, first of all, but also the fact that it's you're never too old to think, what do I want to do, what do I want to be when I grow up. I don't think we should ever lose that mindset. Yeah. On yeah. The fact that we're never too old to think and evolve, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And this has kept me physically active. And I think when you're physically active and feeling healthy, and just being outside helps all aspects of your health. And again, that social interaction that teaching, and in particular tennis, entails is really, really healthy in so many ways. So I think it's really important to just carry on and keep busy. And for this is a real passion of mine. And to keep following that passion, don't stop.
Why, from a teacher's perspective, from all your years and being a teacher, what would you say are there benefits, I guess, or evidence behind lifelong learning, and why we should continue to learn, even no matter how old we are?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I often hear from, not often, but sometimes from students about, how they enjoyed, learning different things from me. And in this new sort of career as a tennis instructor, I feel like, again, I'm changing some lives, and, some adults are taking up this sport, and it's really become a huge part of their lives. And they started tennis at 40, 50, or 60. So they certainly have not stopped, let age be a barrier to them learning something new.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's the mindset I'm hoping from these types of conversations, that we realize, it doesn't really even matter what your physical abilities are, intellectual abilities, and so on. There's always something we can do. And it's just a matter of if it's purposeful and if it's meaningful to us, then that's really what it's all about. Yeah,
definitely.
So I wonder, now I think would be a good time for me to bring us both back together. And Sue, I want to thank you so much for sharing what you have. This is, to me, very impactful on getting that message across on how important it is for us to keep learning, keep growing, and that it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop at any certain age. So Thank you for that. So now I have Jeanette and Sue joining me back for a bit of an ending conversation. And I guess the first thing that I want to mention is, and I want to hear both of your insights on this, but I think about having a map, and that might sound funny, but it's important to have the right map in life, and the fact that it doesn't necessarily matter how you get there, but kind of knowing what our destination is, or what we're hoping to accomplish, can help us navigate and make decisions easier. Does that make sense? Do either of you have? It looks like Sue's nodding. What, do you have something you want to say to that?
Well, I think it's important to have goals. And my goal after retiring as an elementary school teacher was to get in better physical condition.
Okay.
Because I'm a big believer in your physical self is linked enormously to your social, emotional, mental health as well. Absolutely. And I think it's important, we don't have huge goals, but just, baby steps to becoming, for me, more physically fit. I have a couple other little small goals, but I think, yeah, knowing what you want to do and mapping it out in these small ways has really, really worked for me. And I can say since retirement, I have accomplished my goal of being in better physical condition. So it's worked. So once you accomplish something like that, it really, really, again, makes you feel good that, yeah, setting a goal and then accomplishing it is fantastic.
Yeah, it feels good. You can celebrate those things, right?
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely. And Jeanette, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Oh, I'd certainly support what Sue has said about having goals. And I would add to that, it's also important to be prepared to reevaluate and redefine those goals from time to time, because through retirement, as through life, things change. And so sometimes what was a goal in the early phase of retirement isn't so important as you get older. And you would know that certainly from dealing with your aging mother, that you lose some abilities, but you gain other things. And so that kind of redefinition has to be part of the life path, as you said, Lisa. And just like you might have goals when you're in your 40s, they're going to be different as you grow older, and they would be different than they were when you were 20.
As they should be, right?
Yes,
and I think that's actually what a lot of people have a hard time coming to terms with, is that, from what I hear in my experience is, well, I can't drive anymore, or I can't play those sports that I used to be able to play. So there's a feeling of failure, where I think we just need to accept that we're always changing and evolving, and we don't need to do the things that we used to do in the same way. We can do them in different ways, or, adapt and find other alternatives. I don't know.
Yes. Well, and certainly, as I said earlier, life is about losses and changes. And if you define those losses in the negative way of I can't, rather than looking for I can. So, Sue mentioned tennis. My husband took up tennis in his 60s and loved it. Now he has very limited mobility, but it was at that time in his retirement a godsend. And he had a whole new community and a whole new network through tennis.
Yeah.
Look at that connection, hey?
There you go.
There's always common ground.
The tennis community is a good one.
Yeah, that's good. So for anybody out there, Jeanette, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your blog post and what attracted you to do that in the first place.
Well, it's a story about setting goals for retirement. In my career, I always did lots of writing and public speaking. And as I mentioned before, I think brain stimulation and cognitive development is very important, regardless of what age you are. And one of the things that happens to so many people as they retire is they tend to be passive learners. You go to the theater, you watch a movie, you read a book, rather than depending on your brain for output. And so I decided I would start writing a blog. I started writing it in 2010, and I have continued to blog to this time. I blog more about, finding fulfillment and happiness and ways of dealing with retirement and aging. Those are the kinds of topics that attract me. Recently, I've been talking a lot, of course, about the pandemic and how we cope to get through this time. But It's been something that has kept my brain alive. And I'm interested, Sue, in terms of, besides tennis, what kind of mental and cognitive things you do? Although there's a fair amount of cognition playing tennis.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still involved in education. I still supply teach, and I do create educational products for some of my colleagues, and that has also been a goal of mine after retirement, is to produce some educational products for other educators. So I'm constantly, looking through educational blogs, looking through tennis tweets. I'm trying to do some professional development still educationally, and also some professional development tennis-wise as well, to how to become a better tennis instructor as well, is taxing my brain at present. So yeah, I know my mom has engrossed herself as an almost 89-year-old in doing all kinds of, Sudoku, word puzzles, word scrambles, and she spends a good deal of her day working on those cognitive challenges, and she feels really, really good about doing those things and making sure that she, like you said, is keeping her brain and her cognitive ability sharp.
Yes, and that's so critical. I mean, it's not necessarily a safeguard that for dementia, but I think as much as we can stay stimulated and stay creative and depend on our brains for output as well as just receiving inputs from TV or Netflix or whatever, we're going to continue to thrive. And I mean, you have to add the things like staying in good physical condition, sleeping enough, eating properly. You got to feed your brain,
Right.
In all kinds of ways.
Really good messages. I'm glad that, you two had that conversation, because it really lays out also the fact that we can have this brain stimulation in so many different ways, that it doesn't have to be, Sue, I love that your mom does all those things, but you also mentioned the things that you're doing, which, I mean, I wouldn't have thought of, right? So it makes sense that it's unique to each of us, and that it's not a cookie cutter answer. I know that some people think that if they, they have to do crosswords and word searches or read in order to be stimulated cognitively, and that's not the case. It has to really suit your own abilities and strengths and interests, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, you could add things like playing bridge, which is one of my passions. You could, I mean, there's lots of ways that you stay stimulated and depend on your brain to problem solve and to use some of its capacity other than the ways that you used it when you were in the middle of a career.
Right. Yeah. We're just always changing. Well, this has been just so wonderful to touch base with both of you and have you both share your very important insights. I think it's going to be really helpful to the people listening, as it is for me, which is really the reason that I'm doing this show. So thank you both so much for letting me tap into your wisdom and your knowledge. And yeah, it's just been such a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Lisa, on this program.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa and Jeanette. I'm going to have to check out that blog, Jeanette, for sure.
Thank you.
You can share it with your mom, Sue.
Yes, definitely.
Well, thank you, everybody, so much. This has been so much fun. This is Learning for Love, Lessons for Life. And I'm Lisa Jaworski. Take good care.